Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Phill and Sam for what is going to be the longest gap between episodes in a series we have ever done on this channel. We are revisiting Rogue One, ... after the release of Andor. You might be wondering, what is this long gap? The show finished a few days ago. We went live back in September 2022 for a Rogue One revisit before Andor came out, and we joked that we would come back after the series is finished, whatever year that will be. Obviously, we didn't know about strikes back then and many other things, and Andor has now finished this week, and we have all rewatched Rogue One. We've revisited it for not the sake of this video. I'm sure after the finale, we'd have all been watching Rogue One anyway, which is what a great many people have done. But before I even start getting into Rogue One, gents, how are we both doing tonight?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Obviously, I was here for the season finale a few days ago. We talked about us coming back for this, and I have done my rewatch, and I am. Woo! There's a lot to decompress in this video, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I'm feeling really weird about the whole thing. I feel like I went on an emotional roller coaster on Wednesday. Have had a cold the entirety of the time, so I felt awful. Watched Rogue One, got my ear pierced yesterday. It's been a very weird, week. But very excited to finally talk some Star Wars. Not that I don't like talking about Last of Us, George, but it is nice to just go back to Star Wars a little bit.
We've got a special point. We have a little PDF schedule. It's not too intense, but I have wrote a note, and it is going to be Sam's thoughts on Andor Season 2, because with only 4 weeks of episodes, different people, we've had new people jump on the channel. We've not been able to get the usual suspects on, and I was very glaring in the know that I was like, shit, like Sam was on our Season 2 preview video. We haven't been able to get him on the spoiler discussions. We need him on Rogue One. And we'll get your thoughts very brief, not briefly. In a moment, we'll get to them because I want to give you a bit of time to have the floor. But everybody watching at home, we are, of course, going to be talking Andor spoilers. We're going to be talking Rogue One. Spoiler alert, it came out almost 10 years ago. We want to hear your thoughts on both these projects, whether you've rewatched Rogue One, whether you haven't, whether you've enjoyed Andor, you haven't. If things have changed for you, re-contextualized is the word I think Diego Luna and Tony Gore have been saying. So many great channels have been doing Rogue One videos. I think others are planned. As we said, as is a sort of 2.5-year sequel in the making. I even went back and watched, I say the first half. I just didn't get time to finish it. The first half of that video from 2022. And Sam, I'm not going to throw into the bus. Phil, I know you were ill that day. Me and you are both in different environments doing videos now, which was like the throwback of throwbacks. So there's a little bit of nostalgia even 2.5 years ago. It was a very different time. Kenobi had even finished, and it kind of makes me think, as eternal as the gap between Andor seasons has felt, it's 2.5 years. It feels like longer, and I think because we had 2 celebrations in that time and so many other things, we'll be talking about that. So people who are watching live, do get involved. If you're not watching live, we'll reply to your comments. If you're a fan of Star Wars, we've obviously got a whole complete Andor spoiler discussion playlist now. That's in the link in the description. And a lot of other videos we're working on. Sam mentioned The Last of Us. We've got videos for that every Monday. That's got 2 more episodes, yet 2 more episodes this season. We've got Mission Impossible videos coming out across the week. Me and Tate will be live next Saturday with a very big spoiler discussion. The Doctor Who finale in a few weeks. Tate will be putting together a team to do that one. But yeah, it kind of feels sad. And I'm going to say, this isn't the final Andor video on the channel. I'm going to be doing a ranking video on the story arcs at some point in this week. I don't know when. Don't quote me on it, but I'm just going to be doing a short little ranking on each story arc, where I put them, etc., etc. Other people, if you want to find where we are, social media, linktree.com/cinemasavvy. That'll put through to all of our accounts: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky. We have people in the comments. Carl Roberts, do you want to know the Siskel rate of how much I enjoy this movie? It's high. It's very high. Oh, we get to talk about K2. We've got Dave in the comments, hero and legend. It's such a different watch after Andor. Have a good discussion, gentlemen. Lovely to get Dave's thoughts, as always. Sam, the floor is yours. Andor Season 2, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I feel very like it's Bale to Mon Mothma here in the Senate. Like, okay, I'm going to have my moment. Andor has been the biggest surprise of Star Wars in a long time. I know I was very skeptical about it at the beginning. I think I even mentioned this. I've mentioned this a few times. Like, why are we focused on this character? Why do we need to go into this much depth on this? And that was that was just wanting focus on other things. But this series has been amazing and ultimately is my favorite of any of the Star Wars TV shows that have come out. And probably the best piece of Star Wars media for me since Rogue One came out, basically. The Mandalorian I still love a lot. All the Star Wars TV shows I actually like in different ways. But this to me is as close as you can get for Star Wars prestige television. And season 2, my one kind of big grating point about it is that it does feel like there's a lot for one season, and you can so easily see how this could have stretched to more seasons. I think if anything, if it would have been 3 seasons long, I feel like that would have been a happy medium. I look at what story we got and think about 5 seasons and think that probably would have been too much. But I think some of these arcs could have extended through further. And it's a shame that some characters didn't get as much of a spotlight as they deserved. And I think some get pushed back a bit. But more importantly than that, the characters that do really need the focus do still get it. And that's the main thing. And I respect Tony Gilroy's appreciation for making good quality drama and ensuring that we as the viewer see what needs to be seen. His comments about cameos, about story beats that aren't necessary, I really respect that. And the fact that we get such a solid conclusion, knowing that we have a film that's really the actual series finale, is Rogue One. But yeah, I've just absolutely adored the show, and I'm just so gutted that it's ended so soon. As you said, George, it's been 2.5 years, and it's been absolutely worth the wait. Still having the politics be such a focus is one of my greatest kind of pleasures from the show. I love the intrigue. I love everything to do with Mon Mothma, with Luthen, with Clea. Those scenes are my absolute favorites, but I love the heart of this show, and Cassian really does, become his own even more. And you totally see how he becomes the character that he is in Rogue One. Everything that he's been through, his relationship with, his essentially now chosen family, with Bix, with Wilman, the rebellion, meeting Kay. It's really beautiful, and that's what makes it so unbelievably tragic. But I'm glad that we had it. I'm glad that we got to see more of the ISB, that we see the inner workings of this empire and the actual threat and danger that they provide. I feel like we see so little of it in the grand scheme of things. We've heard so much. We see things directly from the top dogs, especially Vader and the Emperor. But to see how dangerous the Empire is, just from a battalion of troopers, it's frightening. And I think that the Gorman massacre in particular is one of the most beautiful episodes in the most haunting way. And I think it takes a lot of balls to do an episode like that. And I think episode 8 and episode 9, that back-to-back, was absolutely my favorite part of this whole series. Seeing Mon Mothma's final speech at the Senate, the escape with Andor, really seeing the alliance come together, and then finally, the downfall of Dedra, Luthen's final act, and Clea's escape. I don't think I've ever.
Oh no! Has the Empire got Sam?
Apparently so.
We've lost Sam in the most dramatic way as he's talking about the finale of Andor season 2.
Talking about the ISB, the ISB. Nope, we don't like this opinion. Gone.
At least to an extent, we've got it on a stream, so we've witnessed it firsthand. It's not roleplay; it's actually part of it. Okay. Whilst we are working hard on potentially bringing Sam back, unfortunately his screen's frozen as well, so we'll wait for it to drop out. Phill, we had you on for the Andor finale. I won't be rude in asking you your thoughts again. As we've just lost Sam. Phill, just in the couple of days that have followed, what's it felt like the last 3-4 days, like prepping for your Rogue One rewatch, what you've seen online? Just talk to me whilst we get Sam back.
It's been interesting. So I watched, obviously, the finale before we went on air, stayed up late, went into the finale, we came on, we had our discussion. And in the time period between then and now, I have been quite busy sorting a few things out in my life, chatting to friends and family and other people about the show, seeing the unanimous feeling. And I spoke to you about this when we did our review, of people genuinely loving the finale, loving the show, loving the story arcs, and just some of the interesting takes. I mean, I know I was speaking to you before we came on air about a chat I was having with a friend of mine, Robin, who's a friend of the channel, about the writing between Tony Gilroy and Dave Filoni, the differences. The subjectiveness obviously is there. Obviously, everyone has their own opinion as to what makes good Star Wars, but this has been unanimous compared to, let's say, The Acolyte, where The Acolyte got a lot of hate, and in my eyes, undeservedly so, but then again, it's subjective. It really is. This has felt like a proper pulling together of all fans from all different areas, because the show offers so many different takes of Star Wars within the same medium without it looking like it's trying to appeal to so many different areas. So me going back into it, obviously today in preparation for this particular discussion, I rewatched episode 12 of season 2 just to kind of get the flow going into Rogue One and really hammer home that impact. We're going to talk more about that as we go along, but I said it when we did it, and I stand by it now, having done it. The season finale, those 3 episodes, the film obviously for Rogue One, and then for A New Hope is now its own like mini trilogy, and it flows spectacularly well, and it flows in a way that was really unexpected. That's been the one thing I can take away from those last few days of going back and watching it and kind of re-experiencing it, is when Rogue One originally came out, we had it flow into episode 4. Now we have the story of Andor that flows into Rogue One, that flows into episode 4, but it now feels like a really sublime transition from the expanded universe, for lack of a better term, into the Skywalker saga. It's a wonderful transition piece, and if you go back and if you do a full watch of all the films, if you watch the Skywalker saga by itself, you get obviously the Skywalker saga. If you then stick it in other bits and pieces you go along, like Solo and Rogue One, you get a more complete story. Andor's one of those really key and critical parts, I think, now not only adds to the story, but I think emphasizes and highlights the story, especially for episode 4. Going from the prequels into the reign and terror of the Galactic Empire, you now have gone from what they were fighting against to how they started fighting back to what they were finally able to achieve. And that opening crawl, I mean, you've got to give it to John Knoll, who took one line and created an incredible film from that then spawned off characters. And the biggest thing I've been thinking about is when Andor was very first announced, we had a discussion about it between us, you, me, and Dave, and other people as well, saying they've taken one of the characters we don't really care too much about from Rogue One. They could have done anything else. Why have they done this? And Tony Gilroy has taken it, flipped the script entirely, going, this couldn't have been about anybody else. And it just works perfectly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'll just do a quick update. We are working on getting Sam back. His internet's gone, so we'll get him back on as soon as we can. I'm going to sort of jump to you as well, talking without fully getting to Rogue One at the moment, so I want to give Sam a few more minutes. The announcement of the Andor series, and I think it's points look back, especially with the Rogue One conversation. And I spoke about this back on that video a couple of years ago. I probably spoke about it at loads in the spoiler discussions. I remember being one of my biggest criticisms of Rogue One was the character of Cassian Andor. I didn't feel like he had as much development as others, and I didn't particularly care about him as much as others. When you had the fake death on the stairs with Krennic, when you get the finale with Jin on the beach, I never gravitated toward the character. And I think what had me disappointed back in 2016 was the fact that on the press tour, Diego Luna was by far the most charismatic of the group. And I think that was the biggest issue for me with the characters. I love the actor. I've enjoyed what he's doing on a promotional run, but I don't think he's been given a character and the depth to match how much I've enjoyed seeing him promote this film. So when the Cassian show gets announced, I am still in that concerning mode where it's like, why Andor? I get why you're not turret based. And if you kind of think about it, if you look at the other group from Rogue One, there's no one else that you could do the show about because everyone else's character arcs, I wouldn't say fulfilled because they all have their resolutions. But in terms of depth, in terms of looking at a rebellion, the heroic side, the darker side of the Rebel Alliance, which this film very much goes into, it goes into without really showing that darker side by one person getting killed at the start. Cassian is the no-brainer of actually, yeah, he did need the show. You could do the most with him. He's been in the fight since he was 6 years old, he said. And we were like, what is that backstory? So it's really interesting that we get to get these two great seasons of TV. We see his character arc from being, a kid being sort of taken from his home planet with his adopted mother, his adopted father being killed, then heading into a rebellion and becoming a key player, captain by title, but let's be honest, he's a bit more than a captain at this point in time. And I think for them to make the show about him was a brave decision, and it's paid off to the absolute full extent it could. We have a Sam back. We're so glad we've got you on, Sam. We were just talking, we've avoided getting into Rogue One yet, but we were just sort of talking about I guess we could say the Andor announcement at the time and what we thought following on from Rogue One before we saw Andor. Do you want to quickly round out your thoughts on season 2? I know you were talking about the end of Luthen, which is when we knew that ISB got you.
Yeah, the ISB did get me, and if they get me again, I probably won't try to come back on. So yeah, thank you for bringing me back. But yeah, basically, I was just going to round up in saying is that I was really happy that certain characters such as Claire didn't die. I was fully expecting the majority of the cast to not make it, and very pleasantly surprised that many did. Hopefully, that opens up a lot of story in the future in expanded media for these characters to flourish even further and show how they support the rebellion and hopefully the New Republic as well in the future. And of course, that final kick in the teeth with Bix and baby Andor at the end. So awful, but amazing in what it does. And I know there's been a few people not liking that story beat. I think it's an obvious thing to do. And sometimes that's absolutely fine to kind of go with a choice like that. And I don't think it takes away anything from Bix's character. And I think it just adds more to it. I think she's a really well-rounded character who's got so much to her. And I think just carrying on the legacy of Andor and Ferrex is a great place to kind of leave her, and hopefully she'll appear in the future too. So yeah, overall, absolutely loved the season, the series as a whole. Really sad it's ended. So it's been nice to kind of go back to Rogue One and to really kind of look at this era that we've had, as short as it's been.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of segue that. So we've got a plan. It's not a locked in, we're doing A, B, C, D, E, F, but I've just written down the sort of the 3-act structure of Rogue One. I've put a couple of bullet points in it, I think about key things, but where I kind of want to go with this very quickly, I just want everyone's thoughts immediately having rewatched Rogue One post-Andor. And if I jump in first, I'm going to maintain it's still one of my favorite Star Wars films. And this is where this conversation really kickstarts for me. One of the not one of the criticisms just being I didn't think Andor was the best written and the most interesting at the time in 2016. The opening act, the first sort of 30 minutes of Rogue One, historically was where people would say this is where the reshoots came in. We're getting thrown into all these characters and places without not knowing context, but it hits you at like 100 miles an hour. And it does settle once you get to Jeddah, then to Eadu and Scarif. It's really grown. But watching it after Andor, that we're going at 100 miles an hour opening, yeah, too fucking right. Because Luthen just died the day before. They know there's a weapon. They don't know the scale of the weapon. Tarek's ringing saying he'll only speak to Andor. The Death Star plans are out and the Empire is shitting it internally. Immediately, I will raise this film to say that Andor has elevated the quality of Rogue One so importantly on the opening act, which finally puts it on a par with the second and third acts of that film. So a quick summary overall, Andor's massively improved Rogue One. But the point of this video is to go into that, right? Not just to say that, but I'm curious at both of you.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it the nail on the head a little bit, but I'm going to expand on that. So you say obviously it massively improved. Well, it improved Rogue One, but arguably it for me, as I said this, we did a show the other night. It kind of puts it more as a true season finale of Rogue One. But the most important thing for me about this film is if you've never seen Andor, you can still watch Rogue One. It'll still be just as impactful. It'll still have all the key story beats, and you don't have to have watched it to get the context. What Andor then does is provide hella context. It just gives, as you say, that urgency, that sense of building. The opening, in fact, actually now when you look at it, at least when I looked at it personally, we had the opening with Galen and Lyra and young Jin, all that. It genuinely felt, I mean, and you say it's about the reshoots. Well, Tony Gilroy did a lot of world building, especially in Andor Season 1. When Andor Season 1 came out, we did have a little discussion about that first couple of episodes and the flashbacks and all the rest of it. This now feels like a really natural thing to start the film off with a flashback, because watching Andor into Rogue One, you then are used to a certain kind of structure. I mean, they still jump around with things, and that's absolutely fine. But you're used to this whole, here's a little bit of setup, but the reason is for the payoff that's to come. And yeah, Tevik, who's not wanting to talk to anyone but Andor, when I first watch, it's like, why has he just killed this random dude? I don't understand. Like, why? What's the urgency? What's the importance behind this? I guess of the knowledge that's to come. But yes, that now, but especially with General Draven. General Draven, for me, has been elevated so much by this last season. And also, when it comes down to it, you've got Krennic. I know we joked, and especially you, George, when we had our Krennic watch, we did our Season 1 reviews of Andor. But now, Krennic, you see him in a different light. Ben Mendelsohn did a cracking job back in 2015 when they shot the film of bringing this character to life and adding to the myth and ethos of the ISB and everything else that's going on with it. And there's a fantastic book called Catalyst, which also builds up as well. But now we've seen what's happened. We know that, that wonderful scene at the end of Season 2 was like, say the name of Death Star. That impact is now not lost. In fact, that he's so high on his own fumes, as it were. It's just incredible to see. Yeah, the opening act in this, so then it, as you say, it's now feels urgent. It now feels right. It now feels so natural, this progression. And it's just also the introduction for Saw as well, kind of bringing him along for that little bit in that opening adds to it. Obviously, Death Troopers, how can you complain about Death Troopers? They're just awesome to see again. But the KX droids, everything, the entire Rogue One was where Stormtroopers started to feel a little bit more, oh, these guys are actually kind of terrifying. Andor amplifies that. And the entire world, you see again, when you've got that occupation going along on the Rings of Kafrene, again, you also now know why he's at Kafrene. You also get that context. So I could go on for quite a while. I'm going to leave it and let Sam have his words on this opening act. But it's just the context and the urgency have now married up, and it now makes sense, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think just following, Phil, what you said, I think the thing about Rogue One and about all films is that they should be able to stand on their own, and there's a reason why a lot of people enjoyed Rogue One. There's a few people that I've met who do claim Rogue One to be their favorite Star Wars film, and because it has such a distinct style to it, and such a different kind of story, where it's not just focused on the Skywalkers, and it's about the entire world around them, and just focusing on different people. And I think that's what Andor's really been able to do, is to kind of elevate stories of characters outside of the main focus, which I think hopefully that will go on into other Star Wars projects. But in terms of what I was thinking, I'm like, the Death Star is essentially Empire's version of the Titanic. Like, they've been working on it, it's built up, and then suddenly within the space of a week, we go from the urgency to get things done. It needs to be, basically released out there. It has some good initial tests, and then it gets destroyed. What I love about it is that now, after having especially the final arc of Andor, like, again, Phil, what you said, that the urgency and this kind of space of time between Luthen dying to the Death Star being blown up is practically within a week. And it's kind of crazy to think about that, but also really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to, at some point, watching that final arc with Rogue One and then A New Hope to see how that all feels. And of course, I think I shared a link to you guys, but I know someone on YouTube who did that amazing cut of Revenge of the Sith with Clone Wars, the final season, or the final arc of Clone Wars, I should say. And that person's going to be doing a cut of Andor with Rogue One. And I'm really intrigued as to how that's going to work. And, as I mentioned about the style, and Phil, again, you said about the flashbacks, Tony Gilroy is really good at making things feel in line with each other. And watching Rogue One, you can just feel so much of Andor, and it's really nice to go back to that and kind of, again, see how they marry up, and to have that link of going to Kafrene and to actually get this started. As soon as we hear that, we know what's going to happen. But everything that Andor became in the show, it makes sense why he is like he is. It's like, why is this guy so, dangerous? Why is he shooting this guy who was just having a panic and was hurt? And we know, because everything is so sensitive, time sensitive, the information is sensitive. If one link gets broken, then that's it. And the entirety of Rogue One is building up to, we just need to get the plans sent to the fleet. And if one of those things throughout the film went wrong, that wouldn't have happened. And so to get that build up to Kafrene and then get this story in motion is fantastic. And, getting the backstory of Jin and Galen, we hear Galen's, we hear his name at the end of Andor. It's really nice to have that. I know some people complain about Jin not being mentioned, but I think the film does a good enough job, and Jin really is the lead of this film. So she really gets to hold her own and have that spotlight here. But yeah, in terms of kind of the opening, I really enjoy what it sets out to do. It gets right into the thick of it. We get a little bit of backstory, and then it's right into, okay, there's a mission, this is going on, information is being exchanged, it's the Death Star. Cassian already knows about a weapon, knows something. Again, highlight going back to the final arc of Series 2. So yeah, it's great that we actually, again, get that context and move forward. But it's a really fun opening. I really like it. To get Krennic, every time I'm just like, this is George's favorite character in the world. He's just so... Ben Mendelsohn just adds it. Oh,
have you seen that it's come out? It was improv.
Yes.
Imagine watching these go. You just sat there acting interrogation. You just like bang. Someone's
feel
like
a bit of pressure on your head.
Yeah, and it's
Like-
like whoa, like it's like it's not physical torture, but that's like
No.
mental torture whilst being physical.
He gets who the character is, and he had that time playing him for the film to then bring that character back and just he elevates the material, Ben Mendelsohn, and I love it. And you can see it from the beginning. You see, it's like, there's Lyra back from the dead, and it's just he's either so chill or absolutely going mad.
I'd be going out for drinks with him. If you're in Star Wars world, right, and you're in Coruscant and you've got a lined up group of characters, that sounds terrible. He is absolutely the character, not just Ben Mendo, the actual character of Krennic, I reckon, would be absolutely insane on a night out. I don't think he'd kill you for doing anything wrong. I think he'd be the kind of guy that's like protecting his mates, that he'd be the one that would be fun on the night out. He'd be using the work credit card.
Also,
mate.
What I love though is the fact that I think what I've just triggered as well my memory is the fact that in that opening flashback he has a waterproof version of his regular outfit. So his waterproof version of his cape and stuff like that's.
And he parked so far away just to dramatically walk over the land of all the death.
It's like everyone get in line. Everyone get at least 10 feet away from each other. Like, come on.
He's an absolute treasure, and the fact even go back to Andor, he's in the closing sequence of all the montage sequences, and it's like, yeah, man, he's on the Death Star ready for Rogue One, and we'll get to Saw Gerrera in a moment. But the Andor thing with Kafrene, I love, because in my life I've never cared for the rings of Kafrene. Now I'm like, one day ago he's at Rebel HQ telling them about a weapon, and no one knows whether to believe him, and now someone's just told him what the weapon is, and it's the urgency that I think pivots this film. And by pivoting this film, that increases the stakes for this film, which then increases the stakes for A New Hope and the knock-on effect. And Carl's put a great comment about A New Hope, which I'll bring up a little bit later when we get to the final act. But I really want to talk about Saw Gerrera, because I don't even know what you'd call him. Obviously, he's not a glup shitter. He's like a secondary character. Right? He's never been the lead. He's never really been an antagonist. And he's sort of not been in it enough to be a supporting character, like a supporting co-lead. He's become this great enigma across Star Wars, where we've seen him in Fallen Order, we've seen him in Rebels, we've seen him in Clone Wars, we've seen him in Rogue One, and we have a lot of him in Andor. And he has a reputation that precedes him. And I think what changed for me watching this, I love how nutty he is, by the way. I love the fact he's paranoid on edge. I like the fact that he's just a vocal terrorist. They're stealing the Kyber on Jeddah. They know that the Empire is needing Kyber for something. They don't know what. But a throwaway comment in Rogue One, at the end of Andor, where they just say like an Imperial Star Destroyer landed on Jeddah 2 days ago. That adds a lot of, not context to Rogue One, but that's like, Saw Gerrera wasn't just like chilling under a Star Destroyer for a year. That shit came, got loaded, and left the planet ready for the Death Star tests. And it makes you think about the Empire as a whole. But where I'm sort of going with the Saw Gerrera stuff, because he is the opening act. The opening act ends with the destruction of Jeddah City, Saw going to his death. The fact that he is this paranoid loose cannon. He's part of the Rebel Alliance about being a part of the Rebel Alliance. Obviously, you've got the Jyn Erso side of things, which I love they didn't shoehorn her into Andor. I will very much say that. I like the fact she's not an Andor, because Rogue One is her film. And I don't think there's any more of a story. You can even look at the end of Andor, right? The moment they hear the name Galen Erso for the first time, Draven's probably on Wikipedia, Googling Erso relatives, probably finds a Jyn, and immediately is like, right, get someone on a mission there to get her out. So there's stuff that you don't need to see in Andor that Andor's covering. But the Saw Gerrera side of things, this is what stuck me in. I don't know about you guys. The paranoia in his head is Luthen. You go back to that first season when they're talking about, I forgot the name of a rebel cell that they basically let die knowing the ISB's got him.
Krieger.
Krieger, that's it. And Saw Gerrera is starting to be afraid. Luthen, like, I could have basically gone there and you'd known I'd get wiped out. And we see this Saw Gerrera get more and more paranoid across Andor season 2. And the Saw Gerrera in Rogue One's like final form Saw Gerrera. And I think we get to see that shaped off Andor in very limited appearances, by the way, which is very much worth adding. That's why he's a supporting character, obviously, but there wasn't a Saw Gerrera episode. There wasn't we got Will with the partisans, which was very cool on Dakar, but we never got too much of them, and we never had a lot more of them than anyone else. But they played their part, and if I just look at Saw Gerrera as a whole, I cared about his death for the first time. Before I thought, oh, it's cool, this guy in the cave, he's finally bored of attacking the Empire. But you go to this final scene, and this is what really hit me this opening act. He realizes in that moment that he is part of the Rebel Alliance. He's to save the dream, save the rebellion. As much as he's been against them, it's kind of like Claire clicking in Andor, like, these guys are all right. Like, they're not monsters. Like, they're all right. And he has this final epiphany, I think, which is with the Galen Erso sequence, which is with that. And I think that's him accepting his death, is him knowing that I ain't going to be around to finish this, but I'm like Luthen. I have played my part. I'm no longer needed. And how he goes out, I'm sorry, SNL sketch has made this funnier, but to pull off the inhaler, which we now know is Rhydonium, going out in an absolute blaze of glory, high as a kite, with this humongous rock heading toward him. I think the Jeddah and the Saw Gerrera particularly, I think Andor has enhanced so much. And that's kind of what you want from not only a prequel series, but as you've both said, Rogue One is the season finale. How do you build up to that? Every player has a role. And I've got a friend who hasn't rewatched Rogue One yet. I don't know if he's seen the last 3 Andor episodes, but he's not ever seen Rogue One. Aside from Andor, and aside from the fact that Andor dies, he knows nothing. He doesn't know which characters are in it. I've been grilling him to find out how little he knows. And I'm so curious to know what he thinks of Saw Gerrera in particular, because I think his character is 180'd by the series, and I kind of want to know both your thoughts.
I mean, I said this actually when we did our reviews. I like the fact we didn't find out about how he had his accident to lose his legs and his injuries and the rest of it, how he got Bor Gullet. These are not stories we need. And don't get me wrong,
Bor Gullet we do.
Bor Gullet we do, but I think if they want to tell that in a comic or a book, that's fine. That's where it belongs, though. If you want to expand, that's where it belongs. Because don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. I love knowing more and more and more. I love the comics and books to give me that expanded. But in terms of on-screen presence, you don't need that particular story. You need the key story beats. We had this in Rebels when he made his brief appearance with the Geonosia arc as well, and then obviously through Clone Wars we had his introduction. The character's been around, and as you say, he's not just a supporting character. He's kind of the supporting character of the Rebel Alliance when it comes to these shows. He's always in the background somewhere doing something crazy. But you also know he's also twiggered it. It's like, look, I do this because they won't. But we're fighting for the same thing. You're just kind of stopping me from doing what I want to get the results. You're just, you're too namby-pamby for it. You're not thinking the big picture. And as you say, by the end of it, he does realize that, they were thinking the bigger picture. I was not. And it's that realization, especially as you say, when he turns around to Jin, he's like, save the rebellion. Because he knows he's screwed up, but he also, in a small way, but he also knows that he has a chance, like Luthen. Luthen never got to see the sunrise. He's now realized he's the same position. He doesn't get to see the fruits of his labors. But what he can do is ensure that those labors do actually come to fruition, that everything does eventually pan out how we know it does. So Forrest Whitaker throughout this, and as you say, being in Fallen Order and other bits and pieces, he's always come back to the role. He's always been more than up for it in Rebels, in Fallen Order, to do voice acting, as well as coming back and portraying the character on screen in Andor. So for me to see all of that and to see that character progression, it turned from someone who was just a little bit kind of out there and a little bit of the outlier and the Rebel Alliance's kind of warning to someone who genuinely, you could see how much he cared in just a few bits we saw. And it was fantastically done. And I don't think enough credit we credit the writing, but I don't think we have enough credit on this point to Forrest Whitaker for portraying that. The crazy faraway look, but also the realization look are two very different looks and two very different characters in the same body, and he just plays it incredibly well. And even in the small parts we saw in in Andor, especially in season 2, we didn't get a huge amount of him. But when he's talking with Will about the Rhodonium, all the rest of it, you can see his exactly. You see the passion behind it. It's incredible to see. So for me, it's partly to do with Forrest Whitaker and partly to do with the writing that creates such an interesting character that we didn't need all the extra gumph to know the soul of the character. And it was fantastic.
Yeah, I actually don't have too much to add, to be honest. I think you've both said what's needed to be said about Saw. I will say, absolutely agree about Forrest Whitaker. I think I would not enjoy the character as much if it wasn't for his portrayal. I think he is just so good. I want to see more of this character purely because of him. And I kind of wonder if Andor as a series was longer, would we have had more of a Saw perspective and storyline? And that's, an intriguing thing, which we'll never know. But I do care more about him now watching it again. I do think I need to watch kind of his scenes from Andor again to really kind of, feel that a bit more. Just because I don't think I was, when I first watched Rogue One, I was like, all right, okay, he's not been in the film too much. It's fine, whatever. Having the added context with, Fallen Order, especially for me, was useful at the time before Andor came out. And then, of course, Andor makes go, oh, this character is, I do feel like he has just been so focused on what he's been doing. He's not allowed other ideas or other people to really influence what he's doing. And we've seen that many times. And he deludes himself a bit. And ultimately, that's what, brings him to where he is, by the time he's on Jeddah. And I love that his understanding allows him to kind of speak more clearly than he has done in probably a long time. And that it's with someone like Jin, who he's known for a very long time. And, to really ensure that her mission continues and is a success, sends her on her way. And just knowingly going, do you know what, this is it for me. I'm not going any further. There's nothing else that I can do. And I can respect that from that character a lot. And I think, him and Luthen, for me, are quite yin and yang in what they do. Luthen is very much the one who stays behind. He does get into some action, but it's always very cloak and dagger. And, his mission is to not be caught out. Whereas Saw can go in all guns blazing. Obviously there is a sense of cloak and dagger there, but we know a lot of the things people know about him, for better, for worse. So I love that their stories, kind of end at around the same time. And that kind of one era of what the rebellion is kind of ending by the birth of the Death Star and the force that does. And that takes us into the Galactic Civil War properly. So, yeah, I do dig Saw a lot, and I do want to watch his scenes again and really kind of hopefully get a better sense of the character. But I would like to see him. I hope Forrest Whitaker does more of the character, that he gets an opportunity in the future to do something. I think he's a bloody great talent. But if that was last time he was going to play him in Andor, then it's a great way for the character to kind of end going completely full circle to seeing the Star Destroyer on Jeddah.
That's very fair, and I kind of add to that as well. If you get the chance to go through it's the whole conversation, right? Season 1 is not across 5 years. Season 1 is its own thing at that point in time. And you get so many great Luthen Saw moments because it's part of that. This is what's happening now. And they're almost not the fathers of the rebellion, but Saw was more than happy to have his face in the poster on the most wanted list to say, listen, I don't stand for this empire. Luthen knows I can't do that. I've got to work the other way. And we have to work together. And it's such a great way to really start to get into Saul's paranoia as you get getting closer and closer to Andor. You're seeing him more and more losing his mind, and it's such a fascinating arc. And kind of, if we stick with Jeddah, let's talk the first use of the Death Star, right? You know, you go back to Rogue One releasing in 2016. The conversation was, how are they going to get around the fact it doesn't really get used until Alderaan? And, you know, simple word, is it single reactor core? Ends that discussion forever. RIP Jeddah City and Scarif. But I want to talk in a bit more, I don't know, I just made a cracking joke. Not cracking, but crap. But we've had the Gorman Massacre. So I'm trying to stay civil because I can't laugh when I'm just mentioning the massacre. Okay. We know the effects of the massacre, right? That stuck with us. Like, that deep-rooted, some of the best TV we spoke about, some of the most horrific, the K2 units, the whole 45-minute episode just played out as one of the most impactful moments in Star Wars lore. To come to another, it's not a massacre, is it? It's a city being wiped out in Jeddah. The first use of this new super weapon, still one of my favorite of Star Wars shots, the way it just appears, you know, upside down with the planet above it. Did anyone feel like suddenly the loss of Jeddah actually felt a bit more, not real, but we've seen the evil things the Empire has done on TV for 2 seasons. We've maybe seen Rebels and Clone Wars, and we know what the Imperials are capable of, but seeing them wipe out an entire city, obviously thousands of innocent people, just because a leak to the Death Star is in that city, it's quite terrifying. And before, it might have been simplistic storytelling of, yeah, you know, let's get them off planet, let's show this a weapon. But it felt a bit different to me on the rewatch. And I don't know if I'm over reading that, but it just felt more impactful. And to Rogue One's credit, what always went in its way is by having Chirrut and Baze be from Jeddah, that always affected them in terms of the reaction later on across the film. Yeah, I'm curious if Andor's done anything, because it really felt a bit different with that moment of Jeddah City being wiped out. It felt like, again, there's shit. The Empire is worried, and we know Krennic's starting to, as you said earlier, Sam, we've seen him cocky in Andor. We've seen him at his, not necessarily peak, but in his most powerful form, which is, I've got it on you, Dedra. I've got it on you, Partagaz. Him and Partagaz, by the way, he calls Partagaz Leo in the finale, or episode 11. And I love it because it's like, that hints at a relationship of sorts there. I don't think Krennic's the type of guy to be on first name basis of many if he wanted to, but there's so much with that character. And again, by the time you get to Rogue One, he's in Tarkin's shadow of being the one who keeps failing and keeps falling. But him choosing to wipe out Jeddah in his belief that he stopped the leaks. I wonder what you both thought.
You know what it is for me? It's the perfect middle ground. So, to put it into context, the Gorman Massacre is horrific. And we spoke about this both on our review chat, but also just in our group chat as we were watching it, kind of realizing that as you said, the oh shit moment, the Empire is genuinely terrifying. It is them, and it's also them in the public eye as well. And that's the key difference. It's the first time the Emperor, has been put in the public eye of they've done this. Lothal at this point has been trying to get out there and trying to put the word out. Tarkin's come along, quashed that, and they've had their own step up. And you've seen that throughout Rebels. It's gone from a local governor all the way up to Grand Admiral Thrawn. So you saw the progression. And for me, this is a similar aspect. In Andor, you have the Gorman Massacre, and you have what is coming, but and you see the impact this has on the public, but also what this has in terms of the impact on the Rebel Alliance, but also the Empire. In Rogue One, you get that test firing, which is I love that they're casual, we're going to test fire it by just wiping out a city, as you say, because we have a leak there. Rather than try and sneakily take out the leak, there's a problem here that people talk. What if there are no people left to talk? And then that's their mentality, that no one can talk if they're not there to talk. So Jeddah and then Scarif is the plugging of the dam, but it's the small reactor. It's the single reactor core of this is one reaction, one firing. It's not the full power that we know that can be delivered. But you see the Empire step up their game. This is the middle ground. This is the right. Okay, we're gonna have to wipe out a city here, and you have that moment later on in Rogue One between Krennic and Vader, where Vader's like, "Look, we've told the Senate Jeddah was wiped out in a mining incident. You also know that literally a few days later, in A New Hope, the Senate is dissolved, finally getting rid of the last remnant of the old Republic. The Senate is completely gone. And then the Empire destroy Alderaan. And it builds up. That's the third act. So this Rogue One is now the middle ground of the act of the Death Star. There's the beginning, the middle, the end. The middle is still super impactful. And Jeddah, the impact that you don't see, the off-screen impacts in the Rebel Alliance is they've gone from massacring people to just wiping them off. What are they going to do next? And as soon as Tevik says to Andor, it's a planet killer, the mood changes, and that's why he takes him out. As you said, Sam, you brought up a really good point of that last. If one link fails, the entire thing comes crashing. That's why he took him out. And so this is the middle ground of the Death Star. This is the okay. We've done the massacre. Now we need to just wipe these people up because they're starting to talk. We're not quite ready yet, and the final test is Alderaan in Episode 4. And by that point, the Empire gets super cocky and goes, rather than blow up Yavin to get to where the base is, rather than blow up the planet to get to where it is, we're just going to go around it because they are so overconfident. And that's partly where their downfall starts. And that's why I say it's the perfect middle ground. This one, I'm just going to wipe out a city here, but it's also Tarkin, his moment to lord over Krennic. It's just there's so many pieces at play.
Yeah, I find it really interesting again after Andor because we've seen more of the inner workings of the Empire and the whole perspective of the Empire and what they're doing. They're doing it for the galaxy. Everything that they're doing is for the safety and security of everyone. What I loved about having Gorman and that entire storyline is how the Empire positioned it and what the galaxy were going to be made aware of. And with the destruction of Jeddah, which again may as well be a genocide, it's going to be positioned as a similar kind of thing, not in terms of what actually happened, but just the fact that they will falsify the actual events and why something that was thriving is suddenly gone. And you're right, Phil, it's really kind of this build up to a point where the Empire is at a point where they don't have to hide anymore by dissolving the Senate in A New Hope, utilizing the Death Star at its fullest. They have the power to do what they want, and they now have a weapon that allows them to go, well, you can either comply or we'll destroy you. And that's why it's so amazing that the Rebel Alliance managed to destroy the Death Star as quick as they did after it did that, showing a real weakness. And I think seeing the whole build up to it, and then watching Rogue One, the events that happened at Jeddah, and then Scarif, then Alderaan, and the destruction of the Death Star, just shows how quick the tables can turn. Even if it doesn't mean that the battle is won, it means that there is actually hope, and by working together, something can be done. So Jeddah's destruction was more sad, and I still think the way it was shot, that entire sequence is really beautiful in many respects. But it just shows the actual disregard for life that the Empire have, and that they don't care who they kill. At least on Jeddah, the Light Star Destroyer get out. Oh, we've got what we've won. But when it comes to Scarif later on, there's a lot of Imperial forces down there, and they don't care because they do not want this to get out. So it did hit a bit more after the events of season 2, especially of Andor. And yeah, that entire sequence I just love, all the way up to seeing that massive amount of debris just going up into the atmosphere underneath the Death Star, which is absolutely fine, just lording above over it. I just think it's just shot so well.
And another really cool thing, the Death Star side of the story is, I just thought yesterday about Tarkin, and I didn't text it to anybody in here, but if you really think about how Andor, right, has looked at the Empire, how they're structured, that Stars explained in a great post. It was basically, there's always a bigger fish. I'm sorry, Phil, I'm going to repeat myself from Thursday, but it's Cyril, it's Dedra, it's Krennic, it's Tarkin. Sorry, after Dedra, it's Partagaz, then it's Krennic, then Tarkin, Vader, Empire, or Emperor. No, obviously, I know Vader's not above it, but for the sake of that photo, he's the bad that comes after Tarkin in the sense of episode 5 and 6. I love that. This is a really strange thought because it's fictional. You know how arrogantly Tarkin's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to evacuate. I'm good here. Oh, we're going to win them. I'm good here. We're going to win them. We're going to destroy them. If Tarkin had got on that jet, I know this is ifs and buts, and it's fictional, so it's ridiculous to have this theory, but if Tarkin gets off the Death Star evacuated, he gets blown up, the Emperor murders him the day after. And I love this idea now that there is people starting to cling on to this, that idea that there is no freedom in the Empire. There's only one free person in that galaxy, and it's Palpatine, because he controls the entire galaxy. Everyone somewhere falls under, and you can then look at the films, you can look at Vader killing officers left, right, and center. But it's really interesting that through Andor we got the Ben Mendelsohn's as you could say, the big bad of season 2, right? That they will end up reporting to him, and he's the shadow that Dedra and Partagaz are sitting in. Yet his introductory scene in Andor, in Rogue One, the Tarkin's introduction is Krennic in Tarkin's shadow. You're seeing who his boss is, and we know who Tarkin's boss is. So I love that Andor's even changed the Imperial thinking when it comes to this film, and I'm probably going to go rewatch the original trilogy next time I'm honest, because I'm curious if Andor can affect any of them, particularly A New Hope. But where I'm kind of going with the Imperialism, and we'll get to Scarif a little bit later, I want to talk about Eadu, which is a pretty important one. And we're not going through the whole film, but we'll do Scarif after Eadu. Now, obviously, I've called it the middle act. It's very much like a couple of scenes here and there. But I guess you could say the big talking point in this sequence, particularly with Andor, is the Rebel Alliance, right? That they've given Cassian the command to kill Galen. And I've got to give Phil, you mentioned Draven earlier. General Draven is a really interesting one, because we're talking about at the beginning, everyone's running at 100 miles an hour because there's this weapon. They don't know what it is. The only info they have from the Andor series is Galen Erso, Jeddah, Kyber. That's it. They're the words. I've said it the wrong way around, but they do not know the context of Galen Erso. They don't know the context in Rogue One, but now we have it in black and white in Andor, that to them he is a name, and he's a scientist working on the weapon. I understand General Draven's shoot him, kill him. And where that sequence goes, with Andor refusing to follow orders, not for the first time and not for the last time in this film too, but making the conscious decision to not kill him in cold blood. A character in which the soundtrack at this point in the film is very much what is on his shoulders is Luthen, where it's you kill every single loose end possible. If they're involved, they're a collaborator, they could be used against us or with us. That mentality does seep through to the rebellion at times, and Eadu sending all the X-Wings and Y-Wings to destroy the facility with Galen intact. I quite like it because it's a weakness on the rebel side, that they are well within their right to eventually, not realize they were wrong because they've killed Galen, but they were wrong to send that kill command out because they needed him. He wasn't a villain. And I know I've just waffled a lot, but did Eadu change anything with you with how that sequence went, or did it still feel the same? I know by the time you get to Scarif, it's not as differing, and certainly Cassian's ending is, but I'm just really curious about the Eadu side of things as well for people.
For me, it's still very much the one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter kind of feeling to it. Cassian, it does change slightly, and it is Cassian's point of view of as you say, it's not the first time he disobeyed orders, it's not the last, and I guarantee you, if he had survived through Rogue One, it definitely wouldn't be the last time he survived. And I think a lot of it is to do with Luthen Clea, Vel, and probably Mon, the entire impact of different people on him. Because as he says to Jin afterwards, because he doesn't deny the fact that he had the kill order, but he does say, you know, I had every right to pull every chance to pull the trigger, and I didn't. And he checks us, did I pull the trigger? I didn't. And he's not justifying it to himself anymore. He's justifying it to Jin. He's made that decision in his mind, going, hang on a second, this doesn't quite. He's there you have a wonderful shot of him putting his finger on the trigger. Then you see all the other scientists get killed, apart from Galen. And he takes his finger off the trigger. He doesn't know the words that are being said, but the context that's inferred to him of, hang on a second, if they killed everyone else but him, this doesn't add up to much. It adds up to him still being important, but not quite how we thought. You can see the cogs whirring. And unfortunately, those cogs don't get a chance to finish working out everything because the X-Wings come in, because you have the bombing run. And Jin, to her credit, does turn around and say, look, those were Alliance bombs that killed him. You know, you're not as clean cut, black and white, good and bad as you think you are. Cassian agrees. You know, no, we're not, basically. However, we're trying to do a little bit more good than we are bad. Essentially, you can see the cogs whirring. Eadu is not the biggest impact of. To be fair, it's kind of, yes, it's there more for Jin, and it's because it's Rogue One, it's Jin's film. Yeah. Yes, it makes sense. If you look at it from the context of Andor, it doesn't add too much. But in the context of Rogue One individually, it still has an impact, and I do think that's the difference between the two. If you are doing a rewatch, if you haven't watched it at all, if you're going through. If you've watched Rogue One by itself, it still has that impact. If you know what happens in Andor, it still has an impact. I think it's slightly less now, purely based on what's been going on around it. But it's not changed a huge amount for me. What has changed a little bit is more seeing Cassian's point of view. Jin's point of view doesn't change, and it's fantastic to see. And Galen as well, with Krennic, that whole thing stays exactly as it was for me when I watched it back in 2016, with still the same impact. And it is an impact. Watching the Alliance take someone out going, we had to make a rash decision. Now you know why there's a rash decision, adds to it. But the Cassian aspect is improved upon because of Andor. So it's kind of, yes, there's more, but at the same time, there isn't, but that's okay. Not everything has to be improved because of, of Andor. It's still by itself. So, yeah, a bit of both.
Yeah, Eadu doesn't change too much for me either. I do think it shows kind of that it for me, the main thing about it is that it showcases the Rebel Alliance not being totally, the best in their decision making, and that not really forward thinking, but with the events of Andor, plus what has already happened, we know that there's a time crunch here, and they've got to make some really quick decisions, and not all of them are going to be the correct ones, but they're just making decisions based on what they believe is the right thing to do. They've been made enough aware of a weapon that things are happening. The Empire is building up something massive. Jedda's just been destroyed. The person who made this, who helped develop and make this weapon, is out there. He needs to be taken out because who knows what he's going to do next. I think the good thing about having Andor, the series, be there is that it showcases Andor a bit more as a character, that he's not just a soldier. I think we get that enough from the film that there is more to this person. He's not someone who just follows orders. We know that from the get-go. On Kafrene, with his actions there and what goes on, he will do what's best for the mission. If he's believing that Galen being left alive is what's the best thing, I'm gonna roll with that, and especially more so after the show, because we've seen everything that he's done. He's not been the one to follow orders 100%. If he believes something needs to be done, he'll do that. So I find it really interesting from that perspective. But I guess everything else, Eadu is probably the thing that kind of changes the least in the film, and I think it's probably personally one of the weaker elements of the film. I kind of wish we had more time there. It feels like a quick stop to just link between Jeddah and Scarif. But I still think that whole sequence is great to see. And at the X-wings and Y-wings in atmosphere in a dark setting. Again, we have this wonderful moment with Krennic showing the brutality of the Empire, killing their own scientists. Galen managing to speak with Jin one last time. There's a lot of good stuff here, and of course, the supporting characters of Rogue One as well, having some moments there as well. I do think it's all still really great, but yeah, I think it's the thing that's been probably the least affected of the entire film, I think.
That's fair. And then another thing I'll just draw on really quickly is the scene with Jin after, where we get the, suddenly the rebellion's real for you. I've been in this 5-star, 6-star. That hit this time. And it's not because we saw him as a kid, but it's that suddenly the rebellion is real for you. And if you can go back to season 1, where the 12 episodes is him basically becoming a trusted rebel for Luthen. And I love this idea that, we had the history through Andor, the series, that, something happened when he was a kid, he didn't like the Empire, he got took away. But the last 5 years, he has been working for the rebels. He has seen people that have been lost. And I think he sees a lot of himself in Jin. And that's something I was sort of keeping an eye out for more on the viewing this week. And kind of where obviously that goes is heading back to Yavin with all the intel they now have. We get the War Council saying, which, I don't have an opinion on the council. I think Andor it's more of a better extension into Andor. That great Andor managed to get the senators back in, particularly the one from Sherlock, who is just a whiny, pointless antagonist who I love. I can't remember how he delivers that line about Jin. I can't remember the name of the line, but he just says everything so sharply and horribly about every person. But the big moment for me was after the, I know we'll talk about Mon Mothma. Sorry, Sam, you want to jump in, but during the War Council, you can tell Mon Mothma wants to go to war, not in a horrible way, but she knows. We've seen her go through terrible things to get out of that Senate, to get to these guys, to get to rebellion, to stop the Empire, and all they're doing is just squabbling with each other. And that's something I think season 2 of Andor delved into in a really great way. Was although they're a rebel alliance, they're not like fully functioning, not this band of brigadiers together on the front line against the Empire. They're still in their early days, and we know Rogue One is the first victory, but the first victory doesn't come from the rebellion themselves making orders. It's a group of individuals amongst the rebellion choosing to go at it their own way. Cassian pulling together the squad that is to go to Scarif, for what we know, for their final ever mission. That sequence hit a little bit harder. And it doesn't hit in the sense of emotion, but I feel a bit more amped up. There's fucking Melshi. They were drinking a couple of days ago. Melshi's got mapped out as this character arc, and we saw Pow in a slow-mo training montage. Still don't know why Rizzle kicks one of the guys from there's there, but he's there. And seeing them come together to once again disobey the rebellion really lends itself to Andor. Knowing he did it the day before and they're all grounded. I'm not going to get into where was Will in canon? I know someone somewhere's crying in it somewhere, but I'll just say he had a limp. He probably can't do that sort of, that warfare anymore. Good for him, he survived. But what do we think about getting to Scarif? Again, not to just be the guy what are your thoughts on this, but that felt like one of the pure moments of the Andor series has led to this moment of all of these getting on that ship and going there. So the fact the squad name is a rogue, I'll just add. Yeah. That's, Rogue Squadron. The origin of that is them essentially disobeying orders and going rogue.
Yeah, so to add a little bit more backtracking, but adding more to it, there's a line from Cass which was you're not the only one who lost everything. Someone was just decided to do something about it. That line he says to Jin afterwards hits like a truck now, because the context of Andor, and not just of Cassian's character, but also Mon Mothma. So when you get to that war room, and you have the additional context, obviously, that little montage at the end, Perrin's off with Skolden's wife. He doesn't give two craps on Mon. It's kind of her life. She left everything, and you really see that in like the clothing. She's gone from how you saw her on Chandrilla to how you see her for Rogue One at the end of Andor as well. That very basic, very militaristic, right? Kind of, I don't need my fancy garb and hair and all that stuff. I'm here to do a job. I've started this, I'll see it through. And then, the fact that Cassian also sees that, and when he gets back and Jin is like, okay, well, delivers her information, but also her passion behind it. He sees it and goes, okay, they may not let you go. Doesn't matter, we're going anyway. How many people do we need? It's that bit of Cassian's character that is so much more emphasized because of Andor, and you see that as again that does hit harder. And again, Melchi, again, you now know where he comes from. You remember Narkina 5 and all the rest of it. There's so much more that goes into it, and as you say with Mon, she's not a warmonger. That's what she gets accused. That's what she accuses Saw of, in effect, is that you are a warmonger. I'm trying to do this, but I'm trying to find the most diplomatic way of doing it, and of course it fails. But she's hoping against hope to not have to use it. She's hoping someone else pulls the trigger for her so that she can finally, guilt-free, per se, go, all right, unleash everything we've got. We've now got our shot. And when it gets to it later on with Scarif and the whole, Radis going off and all the rest of it, you see that smile. You see okay, we've done our talking. Now we get to have our action. And now we begin the fight proper. And it's a wonderful scene of, when you've got Cassian there, you've got K2, you've got Jin, you've got Melchi, you've got Poe, you've got everybody there, and you've got that whole sequence. I still do find it a little bit cringy when Bodhi's on the microphone, on the radio, going, it's Rogue. There's such a huge gap between saying Rogue and Rogue One. And it's just that the guy's waiting for the answer, just sat at the end. It's still kind of, it doesn't quite gel, but I love the whole scene.
The voice of Tony Gilroy as well, by the way, who is the radio commander. That's what I found out this week.
Amazing.
I knew it was someone, but I guess not in a rude way. 9 years ago, not like I didn't know who Tony Gilroy was, but it isn't the Tony Gilroy that's spoken about and worshipped by everyone like it has been the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So now that just makes that a bit cooler for me.
Well, it's like you have Gareth Edwards at the end, who obviously launches the 10 to V4. So everyone's gonna have their cameo in there somewhere. I never got my cameos on Crate or Kessel, but I was still there. I still got my bits for it. But that whole scene though is just, it is elevated, but it's not just because of Andor. It's still just the impact of Rogue One itself. And as you said at the beginning, this isn't just a how does Andor affect Rogue One. This is a look back on Rogue One with added context. This is still, regardless of whether you've seen Andor or not, this is still one of the best parts of Rogue One. Is the whole, okay, finally we're putting our foot down. We're doing something about this, because the added context helps it get there. But without it, you don't need it. You're still there. You still understand that the sense of urgency really is now beginning. They know they don't know how many shots they've got at doing this, but you can see they estimate it's going to be one and done. They've got one try to get all this sorted because they know the Empire's coming after them. They know that it's all leading up to this, and they've got one chance if they're going to find out everything they need to. So regardless of Andor or not, this scene still hits like a truck. It now has the added oomph of Andor and the added build up. So it's beautiful, but also it's fun. You got the music building, all the rest of it. You kind of get in the groove, ready for this incredible final act.
Yeah, I mean, again, you've said a lot of what I agree with. I think, I so love that we get more of the build up to Yavin anyway, and to the Rebel base there. Everything that's going on with the Rebel Alliance leadership. What I also appreciate about Rogue One anyway is that it allowed us to see these different characters interact and show that not everyone is going to agree. Like, we see these people arguing, thinking, oh, I actually don't think it's right for us to do this. Getting an idea of how they work, that if they don't all agree, it's not going to happen. And again, it's sort of one of those moments where, if they didn't go and make a decision for themselves, the entire events of the original trilogy would not have unfolded as it did. It so counts that each and every individual who goes to Scarif goes there. They all play a part, no matter how big or small. And that's how impactful it is anyway, just as Rogue One. And, you watch the film, you finish it, as soon as you look back and watch the film for a second time, that all these people who volunteered to go are not making it back. And then the added weight of Andor, of seeing everything that Cassian has sacrificed, that they've gone through, meeting Melshi, everything that Mon did, that she's not going to be so forthright in what she said. She will only use that as a kind of final option. We saw her do that in the Senate. She knows when she needs to speak up as much as she needs to. But she's also very understanding of how the Empire works, and she knows for sure that there's more to everything. And I think that's why she's so fine with it happening, and why she's not ultimately so opposed. I appreciate she still has to be a leader, and she has to remain as balanced as possible in her opinions and thinking, at least in what she's actually saying. But I love kind of the kind of classic, we're a team, we're going to do this together. We're a ragtag bunch of people who are just coming together to do what we need to do. And I love that vibe when I originally saw the film, and I love that here again. But yeah, as you've both said, I think it's a wonderful sequence, and just knowing that this, after everything that happened with Andor, that this is the Alliance's time to really actively do something on a bigger scale than ever before. Obviously, we don't get the fleets and everything happening until a little bit later, but getting that initial Rogue One out there to actually go out and get the plans for this super weapon that they've only just found out about it. It's been such a short amount of time, but they're actively doing something. They're going as fast as they can. The Empire is almost matching that. Krennic's right behind everything. I love this kind of build-up as we get to this kind of final act on Scarif. And yeah, I love it.
That's very fair. And let's talk Scarif. I mean, I'll be totally honest and open with you guys. I don't have a lot to say on Scarif. I mean, we know how great a fan act it is, right? Just before we get to obviously them Tarkin shooting at them. Does anyone want to jump in and add anything? Because I don't have a lot to say until we get to Cassian's death. That's maybe just being really open.
To be fair though, it does hit a little harder for me in terms of.
Oh, that's where I was waiting to get to the death. Yeah.
not in the death. Not the death though. The actual scenes itself.
Oh, the sequence.
Itself. Yeah,
okay.
There is a little bit more to it. So obviously, it still hits like it does back in 2016. There's still especially with the added bits from 1977 with the whole red leader to gold leader, start an attack run, all that kind of stuff. It's all still good, but there are certain moments in it that then do have the added extra. The moments with Melshi, where he's finally going and sacrificing himself. You now know the story. You know where he came from. You then get the added bits, obviously, before the death of Cass, you then obviously have the death of K2. Now, K2's death is also a little bit more amplified because of the background, but also there's just the whole thing where he says climb, which then harks back to season 1, which then really kind of adds to it all. So there's a couple of little bits and pieces here and there. As you say, there's not a huge amount that changes in terms of feelings, but there's just a few notes, a few added background additions to it in terms of the peril, especially more when they think they're trapped, properly trapped, they realize it. You know what he's about to lose. And then we get to the ending, which we'll talk about, as you said, in just a second. But for the rest of it, though, there's a couple of bits here and there. And even with Krennic as well, actually, there's a little bit more added because where he has now lost or is losing his grip on his ultimate baby, his child that he's been working on. He also knows that he's trying to squash those bugs, those leaks here and there, and the whole thing with Miro really now adds to his urgency to get it all fixed up. So there's a couple of bits here and there that add a little bit more context. Not a huge amount, but there were a couple of little bits that for me did either hit a little harder or just go, I now appreciate that character's either death or just where they're at a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think what I love is just how much it holds up as a sequence of events. Obviously, the whole film for me holds up incredibly well, and I think building up to Scarif and hearing it now in Andor as well, it was really exciting. But to actually get these moments with the Rogue One crew before they kind of split off from one another, those moments still hit. And seeing them all go out in the blaze of glory. Chirrut, I'd still just get really kind of down about because I just think he's just so cool. As are the whole crew, to be fair. I love kind of Riz Ahmed in Rogue One. I find him so charming and funny, and that moment where the bomb explodes the ship, it's so just sad. But I love how he's just like, oh no, this is it. But yeah, in terms of kind of everything else, I mean, like I said, I think seeing Melshi lead kind of the troopers on the beach, I think that's especially after the show is really earned. You see him training in the final montage of Andor, and to see him actually, supporting the troops and actually being one of the last ones is really important. So I'm glad that it does make sense that they put a bit of focus on one of those characters in Andor, and I'm glad that they managed to get him back. Yeah, and I think it makes, as Phil said about Krennic, the frustration that is kind of been simmering at the beginning of Rogue One to suddenly just heightening after what's happened with Tarkin, the events with Jeddah, seeing Vader, him being on Scarif, being like, everything's fine, to, one of your favorite lines, George, about deploying the garrison. You still understand him, as kind of annoying as he is at times as well. It's also entertaining. And I think I love the added context of the events that happen in the final arc of Andor, and that you can understand why, because there's an element of, I'm going to be blamed for this, and this is my baby. Not only is it being taken away from me, but there's a very real possibility that I'm the one who's going to be, cut from this. And yeah, that whole build up to actually finding the plans, getting them up to the top of the tower, it's a lot. And I think there's always that tension. Every time I've watched the film, that tension increases, the sadness increases. I think the space battle is still one of the best space battles that Star Wars has done. I think it was so clever of them to use those archive clips from Red and Gold Leader, and to actually showcase the Rebel Alliance in battle in space. And I think that's another reason why this does feel like the true finale of Andor, because we've seen this alliance grow in the different ways they've done it: espionage, small wins, losses, and now we actually see this fully fledged group together on the ground in space, working in collaboration to make sure that they can realize this mission and complete it successfully. And that's what I love so much. And I think the entire way this goes is perfect for me. But then obviously ultimately it leads to Tarkin arriving there.
Yeah, I mean, they come out full force. I still love the sequence: Tarkin arriving, Vader rocking up in the ships. Just like the rest of the Empire's had their fun for a couple of years now. Now the big boys are in town, and they're just going to wipe everyone clean, which adds to it further. But I'm glad you brought up Melshi, because he takes a blaster bolt to the chest and still goes, like, what a guy. I think Duncan Powell plays him. And again, I love how Star Wars is. Sam, you brought up the pilots from A New Hope. It's still ingenious using that original footage, but that puts that connective tissue in to what follows, which is A New Hope. Andor, by putting your Melshis in, your senators, your Rogue One minor characters, it adds to the event status of Rogue One, the season finale, we keep calling it. And by the Scarif third act is just unbelievable. I think, bar maybe Revenge of the Sith, maybe on part, it could be the best final act of a Star Wars film. It's a very different conversation, but as a final act goes, I've always had it like Star Wars is not loose. And I'm going to make a really horrible comment. Look at how Rogue One sort of elevated A New Hope. And someone made a really good point 5 minutes ago. I just had this thought. Andor has elevated Rogue One, and Andor itself stands on its own 2 feet. Because they all work really well hand in hand, they have positive knock-on effects to each other. And so sorry to turn this into a conversation about the sequels. I don't have the excitement of wanting to go back to the sequel trilogy because I know where it ends and what it ends with. I'm sorry for bringing up episode 9. And it's not just the story. There's a lot of things about it. You know, the fact they got a very competent director as well doesn't help that. But because Andor isn't, not like a disappointment. If Andor was crap, that would have an effect on Rogue One, right? Which would then have an effect to the smallest of extents. Not really, but sort of on A New Hope. And it's a big if and what if, but I just thought of that. Someone made a good point earlier about sort of being excited in those collective tissues, and Andor is the bridge from the prequels with the politics into the originals, which is with Rogue One. And it's a really important final act that does all of that too. But when we get the Death Star shooting at Scarif, and we're going to get to the scene now, we know it's game over when they mention they sealed him. We mentioned K2's death as well, which is a great way to go. And I love that we got him in Rogue One. I know some people want him in more, but I like what sort of Tony Gerrera said. You bring K2 and it's kind of like a final boss that you can't blend him in. He's sort of too overpowered in the structure of a series. But the moments in which we're losing people one by one, the sequence of events that have to happen, you go back to the Force Healer and Andor, basically implying like not you're the chosen one, but you're very much, in these zones. Look at Luthen talking to Andor. There was a reason you were in Ferrix. There was a reason you were in Narkina. There's a reason you were out of those. There's a reason you were in Gorma. And Andor's story has took him to all these places that we know ends at Rogue One. But it's the urgency from the opening act through to the final scene where every single person has a part to play. Bodhi getting the communications patched up so they can get through. The master switch being pulled by Chirrut and Baze. Cassian being the one to take out Krennic for Jyn to get that transmission going, and for the rebels themselves to sort out not the air support, the war above to get the shield open to receive those. Every single thing had to fall into place for this Death Star to be destroyed, and it did. And without Andor, not only do we not even have the origins of that from the finale, we don't have it in this. And when that shot is fired, for the first time, I got emotional at his death. And I never cared before, not in a disrespectful way. I liked Jyn. I always felt a bit warmer with her, but her story sort of starts then to Rogue One. But when we got to the beach sequence, I had a tear pouring down my eye. And it's really weird to talk about because it can change. The fact almost 10 years on, I feel more connected because it's a wonderful series. But all I thought was when he hugged Jyn on the beach for his ending, all I could think of was, when he shut his eyes, that's him hugging Bix. And that is all I could think of. And it just set me off. Like the finale with the baby, knowing he's got a child and he never got to meet him. So I'm violently shaking the desk because I'm still traumatized. His death sequence is elevated to an all-time Star Wars character arc. Maybe one of the greatest characters in all of Star Wars. Now his story is said and done. Obviously, he's had the luxury of a 24-episode series in his name. I have to add that. But he will go down as one of the best Star Wars characters of all time now. Whereas before, for me, he wasn't even in that conversation. But I just wonder what the death was like for you guys.
I mean, I hate the bit beforehand in the lift because that look now really doesn't it doesn't gel knowing what we know. But apart from, take that bit out of it, apart from that, it is, you're not the only one. But tears in your eyes, man. I was was there, and it is. He's saying goodbye to Bix. She's saying goodbye again to Galen. They know what they're sacrificing, and it's that bit of it's the most wholesome version of mutual destruction I think I've ever seen, where it's just acceptance, and it is brutal to watch. But as you say, it is every little bit had to work, and every single thing could have fallen apart, and nearly did fall apart at every single level. It is incredible, and it leads into A New Hope perfectly, because you then know what happens next, and you know that it's all bang, 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 and everything had to go right in the Empire. And in fact, actually, the biggest thing for me, looking back on it, is something else we're going to talk about in a moment, but that whole beach scene and that whole ending, as I said, the K2's death with the whole climb made me think back to Narkina. That broke me more, because it affected me more because of that relationship and that character, as you say. I mean, for me, this is one of the greatest Star Wars films, and it is one of some of the greatest moments. I mean, you talk about third acts, yeah, for me, it's probably... I still put Andor third behind Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith, but each one of them has incredible endings. Each one of them incredibly well written, has these different beats and different moments for different reasons. But yeah, no, this ending, it did choke me up. I did have tears. And it is that additional emotion of saying goodbye to Bix that you now know, the child he'll never meet, that he doesn't even know about as well. The line from Vel at the end of season 2 of the "Don't wait too long to contact Bix." It's like, it's hard. It is really hard. It's a lot. Yeah, that's it. That's all I can say on it.
I mean, my thing with Rogue One when it came out was that it really needed to get you to appreciate the characters enough that you would feel sad when all of them went. Because we know how this story is going to end. We know that the plans are going to make it to Leia. We know that.
Yeah.
But it's how do we do that and not ruin canon and make it a whole mess? Well, everyone needs to die. So when everyone did die, I was... You know, you were in. I remember being in the cinema feeling a sense of, you feel deflated, like, oh, that was so good. That entire event was amazing. But when you see Vader's shuttle go to Admiral Radiss's ship, it's just a sense of, oh no, we've just lost a lot. And I remember feeling just really sad about that. And then obviously the Vader scene and Leia at the end, like you get that emotion back up again of excitement, because you know how much is going to come from this. So to watch this again, it obviously is a lot more sad. And what I appreciate about what the film did anyway is that no matter what, Jin and Cassian were both like, do you know what, we've done what we can do. They've literally done so much within the space of this film, and there's literally no more they can do. Cassian's been hurt anyway, so he's having a difficult time. Jin has just gone through the entire emotion of everything as well as all the physical stuff that's happened. So for me, even though I don't love the look in the lift, I at least can appreciate the fact that they are both like, look, we only have each other in this moment, and we are just going to rely on each other. And that to me doesn't take away too much from, you know, Cassian's relationship with Bix or anything like that. But as soon as that Death Star hits, and as soon as they look out and see that blast, it really does change things now. And, you know, for us now, we're not only saying goodbye to Cassian, but we're saying goodbye to his relationship with every single person that he's, you know, that is still alive. So that's Bix, that's Vel, that's Wilman, that's Mon Mothma. All these people that he touched in one way or another, supported, helped, they're all going to feel this loss, and we're not going to see that. In the grand scheme of things, he's not, you know, that important to the story for everyone to be saying his name and to talking about it. But we know everything that he's done, whether it's been in a small capacity or a large capacity. But he's absolutely a key force as to why the Alliance succeeded. And, there's a certain sense of happiness in knowing that he did so much, that we know who Captain Andor is. And it's a shame. I think it does take away from Jyn a little bit, because even though this has been her story, it takes the focus away from her sacrifice and everything that she did. Luckily, we get the film to kind of show us a bit of her backstory. We know more the struggles that she's been through. So I think it still does hurt for her as well. But Cassian has just been so much. And of course, it's difficult enough to imagine Bix without him anyway. But knowing that she wants him to come back for her and their child is just heartbreaking. But it just highlights hope once again. Everything about this is, there's still hope out there. The sunrise we'll never see. Everyone's been saying this so much, but it's true. And it's for their sacrifices for all these people, whether they knew them or not. It's for the entire galaxy. It's bigger than them. So as difficult as it is, and as more sad as it was, it makes you appreciate absolutely everything that these characters went through. And again, it just reiterates, how wrong I was in not being excited for an Andor series. If not only it could make you appreciate more the story of the events leading up to Rogue One, but also the characters, especially Cassian, and everything that he did from basically the beginning of his life to the end.
Really well said. I'm going to add this: there better be a medal in the post for his son. I saw this great tweet online this week, and it's like, if you think about the end of Andor, everyone in the galaxy got a lot more stupid over the last week. I know we've sort of plugged that by talking about the cockiness of the Imperial. But yeah, man, that child better be getting his dad's war medal that wasn't in the Yavin ceremony, because that's probably the only one that had a family. And as you said, Sam, like, not that we needed it in the Andor show, and I kept begging to be like, I'd love an epilogue of sorts with Bix finding out who died or something. But Andor's, when they find out Rogue Squadron died, not in a rude way, in canon, they're probably not bothered by Jyn dying, but they're probably all gutted about Cassian, that he was one of their top guys. Obviously, they get Han Solo, Luke Skywalker day after, so it balances out. But it's...
you forget Chewie as well. So the Rebelites forget Chewie to give a medal.
How dare you,
How dare you?
But yeah, I know, but Cassian did more. But it's just... Rogue One is different, isn't it? It's just so good. And it makes you want to watch episode 4 straight after. And we know that Dave has done the trilogy this week. He's done the Andor finale, followed by Rogue One, followed by A New Hope. I know that Carl brought up in the comments earlier on as well. I'm just going to bring this up very quickly, so I'm also conscious of the time. I think the events of season 2 changes the way we see certain events in A New Hope. We understand what it took to get the plans. I'm very curious for a rewatch of A New Hope this week, if I'm totally honest. I might absolutely try it, particularly when he gets the final act with them getting Death Stars. Great tweet about Wedge online saying, look at what everyone died and went through for Wedge to be like, I've got a damaged X-Wing, I'm backing out. That's very funny out of context.
There was another thing about, how fine they were with, even though Leia was like, they're tracking us, and then Han's not this ship, sister. It's like, they've built up Yavin base for years, and you've just led them here willy-nilly, and it's like, that makes you go, oh, that's, yeah, but, it is what it is.
It's fun. It goes with it.
To fella, there is a great line in the early stages of A New Hope that then kind of really works now, which is with between Tarkin and Leia, or towards the middle actually, where it's the whole the more you tighten your grip, the more systems will slip through your fingers. And considering Tarkin's journey, as well as Krennic's, the Empire's, everything in Andor to Rogue One to A New Hope, it really now comes full circle where you see Leia basically bitch slaps Tarkin by going, look, I know what you're doing, but you are giving us a chance, so well done. It's just it now really hits, because you can see those cracks appearing. The Empire has actually gone from cocky to overconfident and
Very
making
weak.
mistakes. Yeah.
If you think about it, like in the space of a week, they've gone from a battle station on knew about half the galaxy knowing to blowing up planets to dissolving a senate to, I don't want to sit there and look at canon this, canon that, but I was playing the DLC on Star Wars Outlaws yesterday, and it's set between episodes 5 and 6. So if you haven't played the game, it's not spoilers, but there's an Imperial governor who's there, like, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting on this Empire ending soon. And the characters are thinking, like, do you really think that could happen? And I like that we're seeing this well-oiled machine that sort of dominated for 19 years fall apart in 4 years. It wasn't a long reign, but in the context of Galaxy, it wasn't long. But it falls apart self-inflicted. All the hierarchies on that Death Star when it blows up. Yularen's the empty seat for Krennic, RIP, destroyed by his own weapon. He probably would have wanted to go out that way, if I'm honest. But yeah, oh god, that could be a whole other conversation, couldn't it? I don't want to jump to final thoughts, and I don't even know how to do final thoughts because this isn't a review, but it sort of has been a discussion. But if I'm just going to give my final thoughts on Rogue One, having watched after Andor, I'm just going to say that the Andor series has elevated Rogue One to be a better film than it originally was. Looked at to me now the same as you both as the season finale to Andor. And I cannot wait to hear from people whose introduction to Rogue One will actually be from having watched Andor before. It's really exciting as a Star Wars fan that there's like another new... God, the worst nightmare for some people is Star Wars viewing orders, but thank God you can actually recommend someone to watch Andor, then Rogue One, then A New Hope. That is like 30 hours of your life, but the best possible introduction to Star Wars ever. And I know Tony Gore spoke this week about George Lucas. We do not have George Lucas' thoughts on Andor, but for the first ever time, he spoke about his thoughts on Rogue One. And he said he had a 45-minute phone conversation with George Lucas after Rogue One came out. George Lucas loved Rogue One. And should the day ever come where George Lucas watches Andor, I'll be totally honest, it's a lot easier for him to watch a film at a red carpet he's been invited to than a 24-hour series whilst he's getting his museum built. But should the day ever come where George Lucas watches Andor, whatever money someone can throw at him, get the man and Tony Gilroy in a TV interview, please. Like, I just need to see them two discussing Star Wars, because even though Gilroy is on record as saying he isn't, a huge Star Wars fan or doing this or doing that, he has such an incredible way of writing Star Wars. Like, he's very aware of Star Wars. He might not be a diehard fan. He clearly likes it, otherwise he wouldn't be in it. But his approach to Star Wars has not been disrespectfully, I'm not a fan, so I'm doing it my way. It has very much been, I don't have maybe the investment others do, but this is what I can bring to Star Wars and do something different that no one's done. And I think Andor has done that. And in turn, his work on Rogue One almost 10 years ago, without Rogue One, without John Knoll's story idea, without George Lucas's original concept for a prestige live-action drama, we don't get Andor. So many things had to, a bit like the Death Star plans, so many things had to fall into place to get Tony Gilroy to showrun 2 seasons of a Star Wars show. It's remarkable. And it has changed this film for the better for me. So that's my farewell. Andor is going to be something the world speaks about for years, and Star Wars fans speak about for probably decades.
Yeah, it's like you and I were saying before we came on, mate. The bar has now been raised really.
Yeah,
really
I was going to bring up Big Dave. That might be a conversation for another.
Well,
Sam, we had a chat about Filoni, and I was like, well, if Filoni did Andor, Keanu Loy would have been in like episode 1 of season 2. Like, all right, I lived. Not to dig on Filoni, but it's 2 very different approaches to writing Star Wars, I guess we could say. Nothing wrong with either. There's space for all of them. That's the beauty of this series.
Yeah, it's one of those things that Andor really, as you say, it has raised that bar though. It's also, as I said to you when we did our review, my partner hasn't actually seen Andor or Rogue One yet, so I'm going to enjoy watching that experience firsthand. But no, I mean, this is a video about Rogue One, not just Andor. Obviously, we're here to talk about one of the greatest films in Star Wars history, one of the most pivotal. It's a fantastic thing. Andor adds flavor, but it's like having in a weird food analogy. Like, you have your original trilogy, Rogue One is kind of like having your pizza. Andor essentially goes and was, well, here's the garlic butter that goes around the edge and a bit of extra cheese, whatever. It kind of adds the additional flavor that makes it complete. It's a weird one, but I'm trying to think of the best way to describe how much this show impacts it, but also stands on its own 2 feet. It is a wonderful marriage, and Tony Gilroy, I cannot sing his praises enough for this. But also, not only that, but for the actual way they shot it, on Rogue One as well as Andor, the whole using locations. I mean, when you're watching Rogue One, you get to go, aha, Canary Wharf Tube Station. There we go, we got that, we know that.
Yeah.
To see those live action bits, and also I'm going to also credit obviously to Gareth Edwards originally for a lot of the work he did on the film as well. Obviously, going, okay, I want to take this, and we haven't had a tropical location yet. Let's give that a go, and all the rest of it. Gareth Edwards, I do not want to discredit. Obviously, yes, reshoots and rewrites were made, and all the rest of it, but I do not want to discredit the original work he did. Also, John Knowles' idea, just taking that one line. Rogue One for me is it's third for me out of every bit of Star Wars has been done. It's up there. It's incredible, and I've enjoyed this little retrospective kind of looking back on it. That's for sure.
Yeah, Rogue One, I think, remains one of the best Star Wars films, and I think subjective for sure. Objective, I think, probably. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's just got a really strong story, a good set of characters. Again, Gareth Edwards, his direction. Tony Gilroy. I mean, it's the pieces coming together, like you said, George, and things have got to line up. And anyone who's dubious about a story about the Death Star when we know what's going to happen to it, I think a lot of people are. I think especially after what happened with the prequels and the original backlash against that, it was like, oh, can prequels in Star Wars work? But this story did at the time, and I'm really glad that 9 years after it was released, it continues to have impact. I think the only thing that potentially muddies the waters with Rogue One now is just my love for Cassian and focus for him is so much that I do think it reduces my care for some of the characters.
Yeah.
And that may just be a time thing, maybe after kind of Andor has settled, because it's still so fresh, this TV show, of course. And I think it needs a little bit more time to kind of sit. And then I think, I would love to watch things have like a full-on watch long of a lot of the Star Wars media leading up into the original trilogy. I would be really intrigued by that. But I think on the whole, I think Andor really elevates Rogue One to a place where I didn't think it could be elevated to. And just not only just for the character of Cassian, who gets so much more development than he ever really needed, but very much welcome. But just this struggle of the Rebel Alliance and the Empire's chokehold on the galaxy, seeing all these people, all these just civilians, members of the Alliance, starting out from different worlds, all having a part to play. Andor's given us kind of multiple Rogue Ones in a way. You get all these species, planets, all these things that are leading up to the Alliance actually having the power they need to fight back. But that's been happening the entire time. Rogue One's really the moment where the Alliance comes right to the forefront and makes a massive impact, and that leading directly into A New Hope and that battle above Yavin at the Death Star. I just think it's a wonderful film, and I think we're so lucky as fans after, the Lucasfilm going to Disney and, the sequels being made, that we had this film within that to show us that there was something bigger that could happen with live action Star Wars media outside of the saga, that could still impact the story in a really positive way. And not only that, that's now extended into television and having these series that, a lot of people have very different opinions and feelings about, but ultimately, I don't think there's been any piece of live action Star Wars of this era anyway that has been bad. I think everything has its positives, there's negatives for sure as well, but it's Star Wars, and it gives us a lot of entertainment. And this film, this series has thoroughly entertained me, given me so much more, and I'm really glad that we've got it. In a different universe, we wouldn't have it. So, really happy to have watched them all, to watch everything, and to have been able to kind of talk about it after I was disconnected by the ISP.
Really well said, and it's kind of a bit saddening it here because we had 12 episodes, 10 weeks of videos for Andor season 1. We've had 4 for season 2. We've been able to do predictions with Sam. We've been able to have Rogue One discussion tonight, a Rogue One discussion before season 1. Waiting 3 years to basically watch the film again was quite tough. I will say it's been very tempted at times, but it's kind of sad that Star Wars goes away for a bit now. Like, we had Skeleton Crew at the end of last year, we had the Acolyte last summer, and Ahsoka season 2 has just started filming. We're probably going to get that probably autumn next year, just going off standard production schedules. We know we're going to get Mandalorian and Grogu in a year and a week, I believe, next year, next May 25th or 6th. So there is stuff to be excited about, but there's not going to be as much output. And as sort of Tony Gerrera spoke about, Disney's trust to make the series for them. As much as we'd have loved there to be 5 seasons, Sam, you mentioned earlier, I don't think we could have done 5 seasons of the show. And on top of that, I don't think Disney would have allowed 5 seasons of the show. This is a very expensive series, and I hope that this series gets the recognition industry-wise with the Emmys. I know it's a different conversation, but it's weird that Star Wars is going to get a bit quiet on the channel. We've had the Episode 3 20th anniversary re-release discussion as well with me and Phil. The anniversary is tomorrow, May 19th, was the release date of Episode 3 back in 2005. So people want to rewatch it again, they are more than welcome to. But maybe a Rogue One re-release will be next. I know there's a big screening in Lucasfilm just gone as well. But sort of rounding out on this, a weird way to do so, it sort of rounds out our Andor coverage whilst being Rogue One. We do want to hear people's thoughts. So if you're not watching it live, do comment your thoughts. We'll have a look at them. We'll get back to them. This sort of completes our Andor playlist. We'll keep our Rogue One videos at the start and bottom of each of them, just to make it a little bit nicer on the eye. For some reason, YouTube call them podcasts now, but they do. And obviously, you want to find us for other videos whilst we're doing. We'll be on social medias. Link in description, and we'll put you through to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky on our linktree.com account. What is coming next for Star Wars? I don't want to say there won't be anything Star Wars till next year, but I do want to say this. In 2 years and 1 week, it'll be the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. Now, you guys know a bit more. There was an idea, put together a team of remarkable people, that's the Avengers, to do a big Star Wars series on the channel last year. That didn't follow through due to life. But I am wanting to do something mega. And I'm saying this live without actually having spoken to either of you. There's no announcement to be made, but I would like to do a series that will span 50 weeks to build up to the 50th anniversary. And I do not know what that series is going to be. I have not written anything, but I am starting to whirl ideas for a 50-episode series to build up to the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. I don't know any logistics. I can tell you what our big retrospective is going to be we do in November. I don't know. I've got a thumbnail, and it's really weird to say it in a Rogue One thing. But if you take it back to George Lucas, your roots with the companies George Lucas has built up, we're going to be doing a massive Pixar retrospective for Toy Story's 30th anniversary. And the 31 weeks it will run, which is 31 Pixar films or more, I think 31 now. This is no joke. It ends with the official release date of Toy Story 5. So there are legitimately 31 weeks between the 30th anniversary and Toy Story 5 for 31 Pixar films. Did not make that up, unless it gets delayed. So there's big plans happening on the channel. But I moved into this year thinking Andor in April. That was it. Last of Us. Oh shit, they're clashing. Oh shit, Andor's 4 weeks. So bit of a destruction there. But I wouldn't have it any other way. It's been lovely to talk Star Wars with you all. Everyone in the comment sections as well. It's a really weird outro. I didn't anticipate it to be this long. But I want to do more Star Wars stuff. So that will be a collective. You two are shitting over George sending loads of random text like 3 a.m. Like, what about this for an idea? Which is what people tend to get. But
Bring
yeah,
it on.
I don't know any logic, but I want to do a 50-week series. I don't know the context. It's not reviews. Definitely not reviews for that. whether it be interviews, whether it be experiences, I do not know. But that would clearly start in May 2026 to come out for May 2027, wouldn't it? Oh no, June 2026. So that's me talking out loud. That is my outro. Star Wars may go away for a little bit on the channel, but it will come back as it does. Maybe when there's D23 at the end of the year. So, in August, there'll be updates to the Mandalorian film. Maybe, Marvel is reducing its content down to 3 films and 2 series a year, which is still too much. Whereas Star Wars, we don't know anything past Ahsoka Season 2. There's no official TV announcement. We know Starfighter is filming at the end of the year. So maybe there's going to be some Star Wars TV announcements that are overdue. Maybe there won't be, but we'll be covering them here. So it's weird to sort of say goodbye to Star Wars to an extent on this channel, but it's probably going to be the longest gap in a while we don't have new Star Wars things. So a massive thank you to both of you for coming on, spending 2 hours of a Sunday night talking Rogue One. On top of the countless other hours you spent rewatching the film, doing videos with us. Sam, this is a bit extended. I know you've not done Andor videos, but you've been doing Last of Us with me every Monday, which still adds to the fact we've got Star Wars and Last of Us simultaneously, which is very difficult to organise, if I'm honest. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. To everybody at home, that is going to round out today's video, the Andor series coverage. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.